Welcome to Learning English, where you can advance your language skills. We learn here with stories that are slow, clear, and enjoyable. Just listen, unwind, and take pleasure in the process. 1. Introduction. Picture yourself making a purchase. It could be for a coffee or perhaps a sandwich. A cashier processes your payment. They then pivot a small screen to face you. This device is a payment tablet. On this screen, you are presented with several options for a tip. These choices are frequently large percentages, such as 20%, 25%, or even 30%. The employee may be watching you. There might be other people in line. Behind you, this can be an awkward or uncomfortable moment. This scenario is becoming increasingly common. It demonstrates how tipping has changed. In the past, a tip was typically a small sum of money offered to express gratitude for excellent service. Mainly in restaurants, it was a straightforward gesture of thanks. Now, tipping seems more complicated and appears in many new settings beyond just traditional restaurants. Technology is a primary driver of this shift. These modern payment tablets make it incredibly simple for companies to request tips. They display those suggested tip percentages prominently on the screen. Seeing these prompts can make customers feel pressured to tip more than they intended, or to tip in situations where they hadn't planned to. This can leave people uncertain about whom to tip and the appropriate amount. Therefore, tipping today is not always a simple thank you. It now involves technology, requests from various business types, and can cause feelings of pressure or confusion for customers. Tipping has evolved significantly from what it once was. This evolution is a key aspect of how we handle payments. Now, this examination of tipping will clarify why it is this way today. We will delve into the history of tipping and its origins. We will trace how it grew popular in the United States. We will investigate the factors behind its recent drastic changes, including technology's role in recent world events. We will also examine current public opinion on tipping. Understanding the history and recent shifts helps us make sense of this common part of our daily transactions. Do2, where tipping started. Tipping has a very long history. Some historians trace its origins back hundreds of years to Europe. One theory suggests it started in the medieval era. Wealthy individuals would give coins to the poor, possibly for safe passage or as a token of appreciation. It also evolved into a custom in establishments that served food and drink. It might have been a way to share goodwill with the service staff. Later in the 19th century, the practice of tipping was introduced to the United States. Initially, most workers in places like restaurants received a standard wage. However, when some workers demanded better pay and went on strike, businesses sought out less expensive labor. They hired different people, frequently women, at lower pay. Following the end of slavery, many formerly enslaved individuals sought employment. Some employers hired them but were unwilling to pay a full wage. These business owners believed that customer tips would suffice for these workers. They framed tipping as a unique opportunity for these workers to earn, rather than paying them a fair wage from the business. This established tipping as a fundamental component of income for certain workers in the U.S. around the same period. The method of paying service staff in Europe began to shift. Many European nations started including a service charge on the bill, moving away from customer tips. But in the United States, tipping grew more widespread and crucial for workers' earnings. For a long while, no specific law dictated how much businesses had to pay employees who earned tips. The first federal minimum wage law in the U.S. was enacted in 1938. Yet it wasn't until much later, in 1991, that the government established a distinct, lower minimum wage for tipped staff. This rate was fixed at just $2.13 per hour. This low federal wage for tipped workers has remained unchanged since 1991. The United States is quite unusual among other countries for this regulation. In most other nations, companies are required to pay service employees the full standard minimum wage, irrespective of tips. But the system in the U.S. is different in most states. In 43 states, it is legal for businesses to pay tipped staff less than the standard minimum wage. The rationale is that tips received from customers will raise the workers' total earnings to at least the standard minimum wage. This means that In large parts of the U.S., tips aren't just an extra for good service. They are a necessary part of a worker's anticipated income. This history reveals how tipping in the U.S. became deeply connected to wages, often enabling businesses to cut their direct labor expenses by passing the responsibility to their customers. 3. Tipping becomes more common over the years. The amount of money people tip has increased. A long time ago, a 10% tip was standard. Later, perhaps in the 1970s or 80s, tipping 15% became more typical. Today, the expectation is often 20% or even higher. A new term, tipflation, has been coined to describe this trend. This word has a dual meaning. First, it signifies that the tip percentage on a bill is generally higher today. Second, it indicates that people are prompted to tip in far more places than in the past. Previously, you would normally only tip at places like sit-down restaurants. Now you encounter tip requests at many different types of establishments. You might see a screen requesting a tip at a cafe when you purchase a drink. You could be asked for a tip when collecting takeout food from a restaurant. Despite not being served at a table at times, people are prompted to tip at other service businesses as well. This causes confusion for some people. They are uncertain about who they are expected to tip now. They also feel unsure about the appropriate amount of money to give as a tip in these new contexts. It seems as though tipping is becoming an expectation almost everywhere for even the quickest and simplest transactions. This is a significant shift from how tipping traditionally worked. For the pandemic changes tipping a few years ago, a major event transformed the world, the coronavirus pandemic. During that challenging period, many service industry workers faced significant difficulties. Businesses often had to close, and customer traffic decreased. People felt a desire to support these workers. As a result, people began to alter their tipping habits, started tipping more frequently. They also began tipping in situations, and for services where it was not previously common. For instance, more people began ordering food for home delivery. They would frequently tip the delivery person. Additionally, with many people avoiding dining in restaurants, they would pick up their meals instead. People started to tip for takeout orders, a practice that was uncommon before the pandemic. The change was very apparent when looking at tips for online orders. Before the pandemic, approximately 46% of such orders had a tip included. By early 2022, that figure had climbed to about 86%. This illustrates a massive increase in how often people tipped for these kinds of services. Businesses also noticed the evolving behavior. Facing fewer in-store customers, businesses were in need of revenue. They observed that people were inclined to tip more, particularly for delivery and takeout. Consequently, many businesses began to request tips more regularly. They incorporated tipping options at checkout, even for very basic services. After the pandemic began to subside, many expected things to return to normal. However, the changes in tipping habits persisted. Businesses continued to ask for tips. Customers had become accustomed to tipping in new scenarios. The pandemic was instrumental in normalizing tip requests in a much broader range of places. This period had a lasting impact on how people perceive and practice tipping. 5. How technology changed. Tipping. New payment devices have profoundly altered how people tipped in the past. You might have dropped some change into a glass jar on the counter. But today, when you make a purchase, particularly at coffee shops or small retailers, you are often faced with a screen or a tablet. This device is for payment, but it also makes it exceptionally easy for businesses to solicit tips. When the screen is presented to you, it typically displays various tipping options. These are usually suggested percentages of your bill, such as 20%, 25%, or even 30%. These figures are generally displayed in a large, noticeable format. Seeing these suggested figures can induce a sense of pressure. The employee who assisted you is often standing right there, serving the screen. Other patrons might be waiting in line behind you. This public setting can make it uncomfortable. To select a smaller tip percentage, or to opt out of tipping entirely, many respondents in surveys have stated they feel pressured to tip more. than they would otherwise do to these high suggested amounts on the screen. They perceive these options as indicating the standard or expected tip at that establishment. Several firms manufacture these payment systems and screens, with some of the most prominent being Square, Toast, and Clover. These companies created technology that enabled all sorts of businesses, including very small ones, to process credit, cards, and to integrate a tipping step. While these systems provide many valuable tools for businesses, the tipping function has had a significant impact on customers. Businesses can select which tip options to display and often set high percentages as the default. The technology itself, with its user-friendly screens and distinct buttons, is engineered to simplify tipping while also encouraging larger tips. The introduction of these screens has transformed the very act of tipping. Previously, if you chose not to leave money in a tip jar, it was often a passive omission. You simply refrained from doing it. It might go unnoticed. However, with the new payment screens, you must consciously make a decision. If you prefer not to tip, you typically have to press a button labeled No Tip or input a 0. This feels fundamentally different. It feels like an explicit refusal. This subtle shift from a passive to an active choice has made many people feel uneasy and has made the decision to not tip much more conspicuous. These modern payment technologies have been a major factor in the rise of tip requests and the increase in suggested tip amounts. By making it easy for businesses to ask, and by presenting high options directly to customers in a public context, technology has completely redefined the tipping experience for many. It has shifted tipping from a discreet gesture to a public, and sometimes pressured choice. 6. Why businesses ask for tips. Businesses decide to solicit tips for several reasons. A primary motivation is financial modern payment systems, like the tablets seen at checkout counters, make it easy for companies to ask customers for additional money. These systems display suggested tip percentages such as 20%, 25%, or even 30%. When patrons see these choices directly on the screen, it can make them more inclined to give. They often give more than they might have otherwise. The technology makes requesting a tip effortless for the business. The companies that produce these payment systems assist businesses in multiple ways. They provide tools that streamline business operations. They also help businesses gather more tips from customers. One shop manager noted that after adopting one of these modern systems, his store received more tips and in larger amounts. The intuitive screens with large buttons make it simple for customers to include a tip before finalizing their payment. For companies, receiving tips can also assist with cost management. In many regions, workers who get tips can be legally paid below the standard minimum wage. Tips are supposed to cover the gap in their earnings. Therefore, when customers tip, this can help the business reduce expenses on employee wages compared to paying all staff a higher fixed rate. This enables businesses to decrease their labor costs. Another reason businesses favor tipping systems is the belief that they motivate their staff. When employees are aware that they can earn tips based on their performance, businesses think it encourages them to work more effectively and deliver better service to customers. They believe that receiving tips can incentivize employees to excel and work harder. Using tipping technology typically yields clear financial advantages for businesses. The additional funds collected from tips can even help offset the cost of the software system itself. Businesses analyze the data and see that soliciting tips generates more revenue. For this reason, many business owners believe it is a prudent decision to utilize these systems and ask customers to tip. Even major corporations like Starbucks have begun implementing tip screens in their stores to benefit their business. It is crucial to note that the business itself chooses to request tips. The payment systems permit businesses to easily enable or disable the tipping feature. So, when you are shown a tip request on a screen, it's because the business owner opted to ask for one. During the pandemic, many businesses suffered from a loss of customers and revenue. Requesting tips was a method they used to increase their income, and this practice has remained widespread even after that period. 7. How people feel about tipping now. People hold varied opinions about tipping today. A lot of customers feel irritated by the frequent requests for tips. It's no longer confined to just restaurants. They experience pressure to give money, even for simple transactions like buying a coffee. This pressure intensifies when businesses request a tip before the service is even completed. It can seem odd to be asked for a tip before you receive your purchase. Some individuals worry that if they don't tip generously up front, their service might be subpar. Furthermore, the prices of many items are higher now due to what is known as inflation. Because of inflation, some people are tipping less than they used to. They feel they have less disposable income for tips. This can create challenges for workers who depend on tips for a significant portion of their income. Some restaurant employees report that their tips are now smaller. They believe this is because customers feel they are already burdened by various other fees or higher prices that businesses have added. Customers feel they are already paying a sufficient amount and are reluctant to add a large tip on top of it. Many people have strong opinions on the concept of tipping itself. Significant portion of the public, around 60%, state they would prefer to eliminate tipping entirely. They advocate for a different model where employees are paid a fair wage directly by their employer. They see this as a more equitable system. The amount people tip has shifted slightly. In 2021, over half of customers, 56%, frequently tipped. 20% or more at restaurants, however. In 2022, that figure dropped to 43%. This indicates a slight decrease in generosity with very high tips. The average tip percentage at full-service restaurants has remained relatively stable, at about 19 or 20%. But because tipping is requested so widely, the total some people spend on tips may have increased. Encountering screens with high suggested tip amounts, like 20, 25, or even 30%, makes people feel compelled to select one of these higher figures. The screens make it easy to tip, but difficult not to. It is more challenging to select no. Tip on a screen while the employee is watching or others are in line. Previously, you would simply not put money in a jar, which felt less confrontational. Some believe this surge in tipping requests is detrimental to everyone. They feel it harms those in traditional tipped roles, who genuinely need them because customers have less to give or feel resentful. This also leaves customers dissatisfied. This new tipping landscape is viewed by some as a societal issue in need of reform. What does the future hold for tipping? And this is a question many are asking today. Tipping has undergone significant changes in recent years. It is now requested in a wide variety of settings. Will this pattern persist? Will people be prompted to tip for an even greater range of services? Some wonder if they might one day need to tip their doctor or other professionals, which illustrates the extent of tipping's spread. People also question the tip amount. Will tip percentages keep rising? A few years ago, 10 or 15% was the norm. Now, 20% or more is frequently suggested. If individuals feel pressured to tip more to appear generous, will the standard tip amount continue to climb? Perhaps it will reach 25 or 35% in the future. But can this trend continue indefinitely? Many believe there must be a point where the growth of tipping ceases. They feel there has to be a limit to how much and how often people are expected to tip, but no one knows precisely what that limit is. What is the breaking point for tipping itself? Perhaps the entire system will be reformed. Some propose finding an alternative method for paying workers. If businesses paid employees a higher transparent wage, perhaps tipping would become less necessary. This could lead to a more equitable system for all parties. What does the future of tipping imply for those involved? For workers who rely on tips, it suggests their income may lack stability as it hinges on customer discretion. For customers, it means they might experience more confusion and pressure regarding payment. They could end up paying more in total. The current situation is new and distinct. The future of tipping is uncertain at this moment. It is contingent on many factors. Will businesses alter their approach to asking for tips? Will customers change their tipping habits? Will new regulations be implemented? These are critical questions because tipping affects numerous people daily. It impacts how workers earn a living. It influences how customers pay for goods and services. The debate about tipping is ongoing. People are contemplating what is fair. Perhaps the future will usher in a new system, one that is better for both workers and customers. For now, however, the trend appears to be moving toward more tipping in more locations, sometimes at higher rates. We must wait and see what unfolds. Will tipping continue its upward trajectory? Or will something intervene to change its course? This is a major question about the future of service payments. It is a question for us all. The next few years will likely reveal more about the path tipping will take.